This episode of Super Pulp Science is brought to you by booth 1303 at San Diego Comic-Con, Chasing Artwork. Come down and get copies of Cassie and Tonk, Rust and Water, Gear and Sea, Snow Troll's Daughter, and Red and See-Through. July 18th to 21st. That's booth 1303. See you in San Diego.
Attention, citizens. It's time for Super Pulp Science.
Hello and welcome to Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. I'm here with Justin, my long-suffering co-host, and Dan, our excellent producer, who has ambushed us with a podcast idea today.
I'm not ambushing you. I texted you about this 2 days ago.
You said, I have an idea. I said, great.
I said, okay, I'll pitch a story to you.
Little insight to the amount of planning that goes into this podcast.
That's right.
This is a podcast that begins in our hearts and then continues in our minds on the air.
No, I was listening to last week's episode with Negan Sinclair, and it was really good. And I was just saying before we started recording that I had a lot of fun finding clips for that one. I went back to the multi-film clip thing that we used to do instead of just picking one, because I was looking for indigenous actors and roles in film and science fiction particularly, and I had fun finding those. And then I was thinking about reconciliation. You know what? Stop there. We'll get to that. One of my favorite genres is alternate history. Have you ever? Mm-hmm.
Love alternate history stuff. Yeah.
So, I'm thinking in terms of in comics, it was What If. Remember the What If books?
Yeah. So the dear listener, an alternate history story is one where you just take an established historical event and then you change some detail in it. So there's a book by Bruce Sterling and William Gibson, which basically looks at
the difference engine.
Yes,
that's right. Yeah, that's a very good one too. It looks like what if computers were invented way before?
Yeah, in the steam age.
Yes, that's right. So they've got this giant computer, like the size of a building.
Yeah,
and it operates on steam and stuff like that. That was really good. But What If had storylines like it was stories told by the Watcher, the big bald alien who lived on the moon, and he told stories about what if Professor X had died. I don't remember the specific storyline, but there was one in which Professor X almost died in the X-Men, and then this one took a look at what if he had died? What would have happened? How would the X-Men have survived?
One of my favorite what if issues was, I forget what the title was. It was what if, I'm pretty sure it was what if Venom had taken over Thor, or at least that's the plot. Ooh. So the symbiote bonds with
Thor. Oh, that's a neat idea.
First the Hulk, and then with Thor at some point. Like he's jumping. The symbiote is like able to jump a lot more easily, and so
that's a great idea.
Venom Thor was pretty miraculously badass.
There's one where Superman, his spacecraft lands in Russia rather than Central America.
Yeah, Red Sun. Dave Johnson did that. Yeah.
There was another one. That was DC. DC called it Elseworlds. That was their thing.
Yeah.
But the DC one I remember specifically was that Superman's spacecraft lands in Gotham City.
That's right.
And Bruce Wayne's parents raise him as Bruce Wayne. Yeah. And then they die, and then he becomes Batman.
That's when his powers first manifest, is when his parents are killed. Like trauma of that causes his eye beams, and he melts Joe Chill with his eye beams. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And so anyway, it's kind of fun to kind of take a look at the way things could have happened, right? The way. And there's so many different. There's Harry Turtledove. There's so many different people who've done. And even like Watchmen is an alternate history in a way. Like that's just taking a look at what if there had been a big blue guy who could do whatever he wanted. Like that's the only thing that's different, really. And then that changes the course of history. Yeah. Maybe not. No, the mass vigilantes are part of that as well.
The short story I did for the Fractured Anthology was basically what if Martian tripods had landed in Canada pre-industrial age.
Oh.
And so it's like right as like. Basically, at the beginning of colonialism, what if instead, right? There's like the Europeans arriving, but then also these Martians arriving at the same time, and there's like indigenous perspective in there. But it all came up from the fact that at Lower Fort Garry was the first piano in Canada. Oh. The crux of the story is around this piece of technology that lots of different groups of people don't understand, which is this piano.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, that kind of leads into my idea. So what I was thinking was, I'm listening to the podcast, and I was feeling, I generally feel pretty bad about how things have gone with the Indigenous people as far as our history goes. I have a bit of guilt around that, and I'll talk about that later. And I thought, what if that hadn't happened? What if instead the European settlers actually did a good job and were accepting of the indigenous peoples?
Are there examples of that in history?
No.
Does that ever happen?
Well, that's the thing. Like
There isn't. I can't think of a one.
But maybe there's one cathartic event that happens and maybe it's not every single thing. The original thought I had was, what if residential schools didn't happen?
Right.
Right. There's kind of a more simpler way to put it. What if they decided not to send all these children?
So you're pitching an alternate history to us.
Yes,
Right
alternate history. It's not science fiction. It's not. There's no fantasy or magic or anything like that. It's simply, what if history had gone differently in Canada? What if there had been no residential schools? You can go back further and say, what if there had been no reserve system? At some point, something changes in order to let Indigenous peoples be themselves in our society and not.
I think the only way that could happen, just looking at all of history and how that never happens, it's always one group kind of
dominating another.
Yeah, it takes over another. But there are examples nowadays of there's indigenous tribes in the jungle where when they are discovered, people make a point of leaving them alone and letting everybody know to leave them alone. So I think the only way that could have gone
I have so
well
many things
is
to unpack about this that I want to talk. Okay, so the first thing that jumps out of my head is that if we learned anything from the last podcast with Negan Sinclair, is that the three people at this table are not qualified to judge the impact on the indigenous communities.
True.
So we should limit our conversation to the stuff that we would know about, which is like our own cultural frictions, right? Like my dad's family's from Belarus. My mother's family was Icelandic. So there's a fair amount of invasion and what's the word? First contact.
Okay.
That goes on in both of those histories. So I know a fair amount about that. I've read quite widely in both areas.
Yep.
So I could speak
My
to that.
connection is a little more, it's closer and a little more personal. My grandfather was a social worker who moved to Winnipeg in the 60s to enact the 60s scoop.
Oh,
so
wow.
that was his job, was to take away Indigenous children from their families.
Man.
And he didn't feel good about it. Like
Good.
It was not like,
speaks to his character.
Well, he was a great guy, and I wish he was still alive so I could talk to him more about this. I didn't really understand anything about it when he was around. I did, but I didn't understand his involvement in it. There was something there that I wouldn't be here if he hadn't come here to do that.
Right.
So I'm kind of tied into that a little bit. So yeah, you're right. We can't speak to the impact that's had on Indigenous peoples.
But we can speak with authority from our own perspective.
Right.
So I think that's fair.
But we also do have the history books, what's being written now about the impact of this on Indigenous culture, about reconciliation and what we're doing to try and make that right, or to make things right going forward. And I think that's where a book like this can go, is that if we show what society, and what I'm talking about here is creating an alternate history, but telling a story in this time that takes place within the history, kind of like Bright, without the orcs and the fairies. But
yeah, right. So for the dear listener, Bright is a film where
sorry, that's a bad example.
No, but it's a good example from the standpoint of it's a modern setting that accepts the idea that fairies and magic and wizards and like all the stuff that from a D&D world basically is real, but it's now the modern age, and so there are police orcs and there are there was convenience store fairies.
I didn't. In my opinion, that film took a lot of leeway with its history. Did not really do the research as far as what could have happened if they looked at this timeline.
It could have been a richer story. I agree.
Oh, for sure, and that's kind of what I would like to do with this is make there's going to be a ton of research involved here. There's going to be a ton of looking at what actually happened, trying to figure out what could have happened.
I don't know, guys. I mean, according to this, O.J. Simpson was tried for a double murder. The Raiders play in Oakland. Cleveland Indians made the World Series.
My Star Trek nerd heart sings a little bit here because it's the very idea, like when Gene Roddenberry and the writers on the original Star Trek series and the later Next Gen stuff, the idea of the Prime Directive, right? One of the tenets of the Prime Directive is that you don't interact with cultures that have lesser technology than you.
Yes.
Right? You're basically supposed to, if they're pre-warp, meaning if they can't move from planet to planet easily, leave them alone.
Yeah.
They break it constantly. It's like one of the things of the show is constantly breaking the Prime Directive.
But that's why we haven't been contacted by aliens yet.
That's right.
Because we're
perhaps.
pre-warp.
That's right. I hope. I hope. It's not just because it's a planet run by idiots.
That's right. That's right. Could be that as well.
Yeah. So there is this pre-existing condition. So anytime I was reading about this, I wish I could remember what they were called. There's that island where the missionary went to try to have contact with the island. He's like, I'm going to bring religion to these people that have not had contact. And they killed him with arrows, and everyone in the briefly in the international community, it was like, oh my gosh, we have to go punish those people. And then the cultural anthropologists came in, they're like, no, the people need to be left alone. That's an act of invasion, just bringing his disease on his body.
That's right,
him,
yeah.
Right? Like, they have not had enough contact. They don't have the antibodies. Like, his corpse there could mean the end of that entire group of people.
And that is another issue that happened when Europeans came here, is that there were a lot of disease and a lot of things that they inadvertently gave to. Now, I think in some cases they gave it to them on purpose.
Smallpox blankets.
Yeah, there was some stuff on purpose. There was some stuff by accident. There was, when Cortez landed South America and through that region, there's some strong archaeological and anthropological evidence to suggest that the reason he was so easily able to overcome those indigenous communities is that the first trading contact that he had caused an enormous amount of sickness and disease to sweep in front of their group.
Okay.
So by the time he reached...
It was probably something silly like chicken pox, too.
Right.
That just...
By the time they reached the center
never had
of that
it,
aspect...
Or measles.
Yeah, of that empire, they were so weakened by a disease they had no...
Right.
So, I mean, it's the one thing that is always left out of alien invasion stories, right? That as soon as the alien shows up, usually...
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds is one of the only ones that does it, right? The aliens show up, they
it's the
meet
other way
us,
around,
and then they're
though.
like, oh man...
What's funny in War of the Worlds
cool.
is that was like one of the first alien invasion stories, right? Like that was, and nobody else has done it since.
Right.
You think that everybody would do that?
Well,
make
and
that part of it.
Independence Day kind of did do that. They just made it a computer virus
whatever.
instead of...
Jeff Goldblum had to go upload that. That wasn't like something.
Well, and it was that inspiration of Canada's history of biological warfare on its own indigenous population that gave me the idea that So in the story that I did for that anthology, the Martians observe biological warfare among humans and then are ready for it. So they're not wiped out by diseases as a result, right? So they see our shitty behavior to each other and so are more prepared than the H.G. Wells tripods.
I always did think that was poor planning on, the H.G. Wells aliens part. Like, they didn't take a sample of the water and put it through a beaker and make sure it's not full of yucky
to
stuff.
be fair, there's no liquid water on Mars. So,
Maybe
that we know of.
That we know of.
Yeah.
So
alternate history.
Yeah.
So
what do you think? Do you think this is a story that's worth exploring? Do you think it's something we can do something with?
So I always work backwards.
Okay.
All right. From the form. In your mind, you have an idea for a story. You're holding it.
I don't have an idea for a specific story.
Okay, but play this game with me. It's 3 years later. You're holding it.
Okay.
Describe it to us.
That's a graphic novel. I do think it needs to be a visual story. It's like physically describe it to you.
Yeah, physically, like
it's
everything
thick.
about it.
It's thick. It's like the size of Arkland.
Okay.
I don't know why it has
Shout
to be
out
that
to
big.
Scott for it.
240 pages.
Which I just finished, and it's amazing. But that's not influencing. Like the story of Arkland is not influencing me here. It's just that I can see it as that being that robust of a story. So maybe it does need to cover the history of it a bit. That's all I have. That's
Full
it.
color.
Full color for sure. Yeah.
Single author, multiple authors, like an anthology collection.
I was thinking single author,
Yeah.
telling a single story, say one author, one artist, obviously, because I can't draw. So someone else would have to draw it.
What is the tone?
I got a title.
Oh, okay.
A Place Not Called Canada.
Oh,
Because it would never have been called that.
right. Or maybe
Because that's village, right? We misinterpreted.
Well, they misinterpreted a lot.
Yeah.
Winnipeg.
there's a lot of things.
Winnipeg means what? Muddy waters. Is that right? Comes from Cree for muddy waters.
Muddy waters.
Yeah.
There it is.
but I don't know what that was the original
And
word.
Manitowapau, the original word for Manitoba, has an interesting connotation also. But the thing I was going to say was, if you're going to write an alternate history, so most alternate history books, like Turtle Dove, isn't that his name? Who
Yeah,
always
Harry
writes all
Turtle.
this?
Yeah. He did ones
picks-
where aliens invade during World War II.
Right. So he picks a period of history that people in general know a lot about.
Yeah.
And so when you show the juxtaposition of like an alien spaceship and a World War II battleship, you get what's going on.
Yeah.
The hard part here, not insurmountable, but the hard part here, in my mind, would be so much of the history that we're talking about addressing in a story like that is this history that the vast majority of Canadians don't really know too much about.
But they should.
They should. And so presenting it in a way that wouldn't be too preachy and but would still be interesting could be part of the challenge.
Yeah.
And like how far are you showing? Like from first contact, that never happened.
Well,
where does your story
See,
start?
that's,
and where
no, that's
does
where
it
the research
end?
comes in. I have to figure out where. And I'm not talking about the entire history. I'm talking about a key moment where things branch off in a different timeline.
Okay, I have an idea of how we flip it so that our conversation is based only on our point of view rather than presupposing the point of view of an Indigenous culture who's not present at the table. What if it's a story of first contact in reverse? They've crossed the ocean, right? And they've reached Europe first,
Okay.
right? And so it's our cultures who've been contacted by a culture that we don't understand very well, right? And
Did
how does
China
that
not
change
do
things?
that, and then they just stopped sailing because they didn't think there was anything interesting out there? Like China was like sailing around. They had like more advanced boats than like anywhere else in the world, but they were so far.
Well, it depends what period of
Beyond.
history, right? So Portugal was like the maiden sea power for a good long time at a
Yeah.
certain point of history, and so was Greece, and so was Italy, and so was France. So it depends on Spain, right? So it depends on what period of history that you're talking about. But at a certain point, there's a difference between exploration, right? So there's a difference between exploration and trade.
Well, that's I mean,
Once the Silk Road opened up and there was trade between European and Asian areas of the globe, right? That's when you had cultural interchange,
Right.
Right, when there was something for both sides to gain, right? And
Yeah.
invasion is a whole other thing. So, under what conditions? Let's pick a place in Europe that we could all speak fairly well about.
never been to Europe.
I had a random thought.
Go ahead.
And again, I'm not as well versed on this as I should be. Vikings came to Canada.
They did, yeah.
Yes.
What did that interaction go like?
So, depending on so there's a lot of written history. So, Icelandic and Nordic cultures, right, made their way to Iceland, and many of them then from Iceland made it onto this continent. And so, as the last like 40 years of archaeological evidence starts to unfold, we see there's strong evidence to suggest that pre-Columbus, pre-anyone else, right, that Nordic sailing ships made it all the way here, and that likely there was peaceful trade in some instances, but more likely, because the Nordic cultures, of which half of my side is descended on, they had a culture of reciprocity, right? And reciprocity meant that you always gave as much as you were given. And in order to give as much as you were given, you had to take from somewhere else. So the idea of the Vikings as raiders and as pillagers, it comes from a cultural idea that if you can take something from someone else, it was meant for you. There's a right.
Yeah.
It was it's shitty, right? Like you can look at it through the lens of like, so they basically, if they could take it, then they took it.
Yeah.
But they didn't consider it to be wrong. It was part of the religious structure, right?
How convenient.
Right? How convenient, right? And so I think it's probably likely that a culture that has this tie to physical objects, upon meeting what I know about, say, Cree or Anishinaabe cultures just in, like Manitoba and that surrounding region, they had a name for it, which I don't know. We could maybe ask Negan to help us out. There was a name for basically a sickness that comes from a greed for objects. Right?
Okay.
There's some traditional stories related to this idea that when they met Europeans, they were like, wow, they really are like caught up in this idea that this is mine, this is my object. Whereas like, if we leave it here and come back in 2 seasons, it can be ours still. Like, we don't have to bring it with us.
Right.
Oh, my son is joining in.
The first person that actually came to Canada by boat was Leif Erikson. He was one of the first people.
I don't know if that's true.
It is. Well, yeah, it is.
I knew it was too good to be true.
That's what happens when you put your faith in sorcerers.
It's summer holidays, and both of my sons are at the studio here. And we just had a tune-in from their education in the public school system.
History of Leaf.
The history of Leaf. Yeah, my son's first name is Leaf, so he knows a little bit about whence he came.
Jazz is leaving us tomorrow around 10. I'm confirming. Yeah, goes to a new home.
Oh, she'll be happy in her new home.
Yeah,
For sure.
there's another dog there for her to play with.
Okay. Cool. We got Opal over there too. She's hanging out. She's on the couch as usual.
She's like, wait, why do you get all that attention? Okay.
Because she seeks it, Opal. She seeks it.
Yeah.
You're just content being on the couch. Anyway,
Back to the show.
I think so. I understand everything you guys are coming at, and I think that that's one way to go. Another way to go is we don't have to go all the way back to first contact or settlement. We can pick pretty much any point in the timeline and diverge if we have an event or a person who makes a difference. And I'm thinking in terms of, like, one thing that kind of got me on this thought train is when Negan was talking about the scene in which John A. MacDonald is on a train passing by a residential school.
Yes.
And he went into, the funny thing is, he went into that more after we finished the podcast, which I didn't include in it because the audio wasn't great. But that scene of a young Indigenous boy in the field, working in the field, waving at the train, that got me thinking, well, that, like, John A. MacDonald was part of that because he was prime minister at the time.
Right.
What if somebody else had been prime minister who didn't want to do that? Or I don't, again, I don't know the history of it. So I have to do the research.
So this is the thing I would say. If you wanted to start, like, if we were pressed right now, we had to hand something into a publisher right now, and we had to
I don't want to do
make
that.
some gains. No,
What are
but
you
I'm just
talking
saying,
about, man?
what you do is you create a framework around the limitation of what your story is, right? So
Okay.
this is why I work backwards from what is the physical object. Now we know there's illustrations. Now we know it's a single author. Now we know, right? It helps you streamline what the story is about.
Okay, sorry.
The other thing that could streamline what the story is about is we could take, because we're talking about it here and it seems on our minds, this idea of biology. What if when the settlers arrived, they were not immune to the diseases of the indigenous culture rather than the other way around? What if if the balance of immunity had been different?
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Now you don't have to change anything else. You don't have to say, oh, well, they invented guns early.
Yes,
or they
yes.
right? You
That's
don't
right.
have to change anything else. You just change what was a true equalizer.
Yeah, the best alternate history is like one that's one very simple detail
Right.
that changes, that
So
affects
in that,
the butterfly effect, as
Right?
it were.
Imagine now a North America, South America, where Europeans don't want to go there because everyone they know that goes there gets sick,
Right.
and everyone who comes back from there brings horrible sickness.
Yeah.
Right? Now you have a Europe that develops separately from a North and South American culture. Like
Right.
you wouldn't immediately have a way to exploit them.
But they still would want to trade with them
They want to trade with them.
for the resources.
For the
That's an
resources.
interesting idea.
Now you have a balancing act in the great historical calculation, right?
Yeah.
Where they don't need to be, and what's great about it is it doesn't create a scenario where you have to have a warlike equalizer. Like you don't have to say, oh well, there was a culture or a tribe of indigenous people who were capable of defeating the Europeans. They can remain as they were,
That's right.
right?
Yeah. That's a good one.
So-
I was going to say, if we're working backwards from where we're going to end up, I have a kind of an idea of what I'd like to depict in the comic book.
Yeah.
So the idea is being that it's indigenous and everybody living here in peace and harmony. I know it's a bit idyllic is the word, and I know that now that everything's going to go perfectly. Even if that kind of stuff didn't happen, there'd still
Right.
be issues, there'd still be problems, and we can explore that. But it would be a world in which, say, reserves didn't exist.
Right.
Right. indigenous people weren't kept away for a certain amount of time and weren't forced to stay out there.
Well, let's look at that world. So, well, hold on. You were thinking of an image. So
No,
Justin is key. He always makes anchor images, right? So run Dan through what you would need to make an anchor image for this book. What are the questions you'd have to ask?
Well, just as you're running through the story in your mind and what you want to see over and over and over again, there's usually like a pivotal scene or pivotal moment that comes across especially strong or sticks around, and usually you want to really fine-tune and hone that, and that becomes kind of that core anchor for the rest of the story to be.
What was it for Cassie and Tonk?
It was the it's right there. It's
Okay.
robot holding an umbrella for a girl in the rain.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the first image that came to your head when thinking about
I
this?
don't really have an image in my head. I don't think in terms of imagery a lot of the time.
Interesting. Yeah.
I just. I'd have to think about it. I can't just come up with something on the spot.
So I can immediately imagine this. So let's say can't come into North America because you get too sick, right? Or you're afraid of it, right? Even if the immunity's, because eventually immunity would happen, but people
you
would
build
still
it
be
up,
cautious.
but yes.
Right? People would still be cautious. So what you have is no fur trade.
Well,
right?
no fur trade the way it happened.
Well, because what happens is Europeans come in and they are taking way more than they should.
Right.
Way more than is beneficial. And the cultures that were saying, hey, maybe ease off on that, were moved to other places as a result.
Yeah,
right?
Would we eventually have first contact between Mexico and Native Americans because there was
So if Cortez can't destabilize South America and the Europeans can't destabilize North America, do you have a continent with a strong technological bent that comes out of like Olmec culture?
Maybe.
Like, whoa.
Oh, that's a mind-blowing.
Right? So you'd have these
Interesting.
two. See, that'd be a cool alternate history.
See, the history would be, what if the history was, oh man, I think we're onto something here. So, it's not like of course, I've been thinking in terms of Canadian Indigenous peoples and all that kind of stuff, but of course it happened everywhere in North and South America. So, what happens if that is the case for everywhere?
Yeah.
And what does North? And again, these are world building questions. These will not have to do with the story, other than to be background for the story.
Yeah.
But that's something to include as far as what does South America look like right now? What does Mexico look like right now?
Do you want this to be a story with characters, or do you almost want it to be like kind of like a faux history book?
I want it to be a story with characters. I like the idea of having a story within, and it creates this big world that maybe the other stories can be told within as well. But it's just for the purposes of this, I want it to be essentially what I'd like it to be is this is what. If reconciliation is successful, this is what our society could look like for living. You
don't want to start it early. So power balance is an important thing for the background, but the characters themselves. Who is the voice in this character? Like who's speaking? Who is the?
Who's the central character?
Yeah.
Well, I would think. See, I can't write from the perspective of an Indigenous person, so it would have to be a.
What about
your person?
Like, it was your grandfather you said that was involved?
My grandfather. Yeah.
What about an organization that is proposing the idea
of the 60s scoop?
Of the 60s scoop.
Okay.
Right, but in reverse.
What do you mean in reverse?
In reverse. The dominant culture in North America is not European, and the Europeans don't seem to be doing that well. And, they're not really raising their kids the way that the dominant culture is observing. They've got this greed for things.
That's right. That's right.
They seem obsessed with manufacturing gunpowder and blowing each other up and fighting for they're bringing these strips of cloth like flags over, and there's they put it up, and if it's the wrong color, everyone's trying to kill each other. If you were the dominant culture and this was the visiting culture behaving like that, you might think.
We have to
fast forward to the 60s. You might say maybe we should not let them raise their own.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Right.
Wow. That's a great idea.
And suddenly you have this villainous behavior that's trying to come from a kind place.
Right.
Right. Which is different than the underlying motivations of the 60s scoop. Right. Which had this PR move of saying, "Oh, we know better,"
Right.
but it had an underlying economic agenda, right? That of destabilizing a growing population so
Right.
that they don't become a voting issue.
You know, the president's about to speak.
You mean President Clinton?
Of course I mean Clinton. Who else?
That clinches it. We're home.
No, I feel sorry for the prez. Being married to that loudmouth.
This is all very good. I think we've got a lot here.
So that's all setting. But what's the story?
I don't know.
So what's
I feel like I have to build the world first, and then I have to tell the story within the world.
What I like about where this story came from is because it percolated on the last episode of the podcast,
That's
right?
Yeah.
Which is exactly, now if you recall, this is basically what Negan said is going to happen.
I have to do the work.
Right? Yeah, but he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but the punchline was, if you allow other voices into the conversation, it will get you thinking about other things, and then the art that you make changes as a result, and then broadens the perspective.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
He was the little grit that makes the pearl. We didn't go to a pearl making seminar with other oysters. Right? Stole that from Stephen King.
Okay, I have a question for you guys. When it comes to stuff like this, and you've done a number of story-breaking episodes on this podcast, what was the one you guys did with Sam, and then I left, and you guys kept working on it?
Oh, and she pitched it to her publisher? Is that a secret?
This is my concern.
Airlock.
Airlock, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when you do that, are you worried about other people stealing your ideas? If you
No.
put it out
No.
there. No? Why not?
No.
Because it takes a lot of work to finish something, and most people don't.
I'm willing-
And not just that. But
discipline.
that's also true. Most of you won't start.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's true. And if you are starting, and I hope you're really angry that I said that, and you go out and start something of your own, that's great.
Not
part
this
of what
thing,
our
though. Don't
podcast
start
is
this
about.
story.
No, you can start this story. By all means, right? It's the singer, not the song. If you were to give us this story outline, and Justin and I broke up from the studio, and we went to live in different parts of the world and came back using only the information in this podcast to make a 240-page graphic novel, and we put them both on the table in front of you.
It'd be very different.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
The core idea. If you were to go make Star Wars now, and you were only allowed to use the story idea, but not any of the design ideas, completely different,
It would be very bad. Very bad movie.
right? Well, not good or bad, but it's very different, and
Yeah.
people might like it or dislike it. You know,
Okay.
you'd get Wing
So
Commander.
that's not something...
right?
I didn't mind Wing Commander.
Right? I actually didn't mind it either. Freddie Prinze Jr. at the height of his powers.
Hey, man. Matthew Lillard.
Do we have some examples of that, like through?
Well,
throughout
here's
your-
why I asked the question. My uncle is Nicholas Burns, as you know, who's a graphic novelist. He'll be on the podcast at some point. I've talked to him about it. But he was working on... a couple of years ago, he pitched me. He was telling me about an idea he had for a comic book about the strike, the Winnipeg General Strike
Right.
of 1919, which is now 100 years ago. Just celebrated its 100th anniversary this past month. And his idea was to have this graphic novel, ready to go for that anniversary. And then he got sidetracked. He is very, very busy. He works in the film industry. He does storyboarding for all the major productions coming through here. He's working hand in hand with Sean Penn, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So he didn't get a chance to do it. And at that point, he was concerned about somebody else doing that same book.
Right.
And maybe it's because it's something so specific about the Winnipeg General Strike that he
But
was
again-
worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason to fear. Because if any book that Nick Burns would do is going to be very different than any book anyone else does.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Right? He has a different way of telling stories, of breaking stories. He has a different history. He has a different eye. He has a different reason to tell it. Right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's why he wanted to tell the story, because he's got a very different viewpoint of why that strike was important, not just because the pop. He's thinking about beyond the musical. What was that? What was that all about?
So Justin has a story for you.
Okay.
Well, it's something that's kind of along these lines, and it kind of proves our point a little bit.
Yeah.
When Casting Tonk was first coming out, and we were drawing in the books all the time, one of the characters that kept showing up over and over again, because we would both draw in the books, is I would draw this little guy with a shield, holding the shield up, and then Gregory would draw a huge monster on the other side of the page, blasting with fire or ice.
Some sort
or
of breath weapon.
some
Whatever.
kind of
Okay.
like
Yeah.
monster attacking. And we would always caption it Ted the Shield Tester. And his poor little Ted, and his job is to test shields all day against horrible monsters. Somebody's got to do it.
And it was just this goofy thing we did during the show, right? As a way of, because it was sometimes set up at different tables. So I'd draw a monster breathing fire, and then you go find Justin, and he'll draw the other side of this drawing.
That's cool.
Right? Made a fun setup and knockdown.
Yeah, so very organically, Ted the Shield Tester became kind of this ongoing little series of just him testing out different shields against horrible monsters.
Yeah, there's hundreds of Ted drawings out there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We went out for drinks after the Calgary show with a couple of friends of ours, and somehow Ted the Shield Tester came up, and we started story breaking on if we were to do that as an actual graphic novel.
Yeah, a fun, it's something that I love doing when there's a bunch of creative people at a table is I just say, okay, what if we made it? Right? What would it look like? How would it work? All whatever. And so we did that, and there was a bunch of people at the table, and then a year or two, must have been a year later.
I got a message first from somebody who was at that table asking if they could write a story about Ted the Shield Tester.
Really?
Like they were an illustrator and a writer, and they said, "Can I? Like we all just made that up, right? Can I?
Meanwhile, it's been something that you guys have been doing for a while.
Can I do it?" And we kind of said like, "Yeah, go do it because it'll be different." Right. And then it ended up. I have the collection here, somewhere. Should find it. But it ended up as a backstory in a little comic that the fellow put out.
No, you made it as an individual.
Is it its own thing now?
Yeah. I wonder if I could find it real quick.
Coming soon to a theater near you, Ted the Shield Tester.
I don't think he called it Ted the Shield Tester.
Coming soon to a theater near you, the story of our lawsuit against Ted the Shield Tester. But
it was very different from
different.
What we had in mind. The core elements, some of the core elements were the same.
Yeah.
But he told a different story than we were going to tell. And I don't feel like if I ever did want to fully develop Ted the Shield Tester, I don't feel like he's stepped on my toes.
No one would read that story and then his story and be like, "Oh my God, you stole the idea."
Really?
It's motivated by the same kind of stuff. It's like if you wrote a Star Wars story, right? But you weren't allowed to use any of the designs, and you weren't allowed to consult with George Lucas. Along the way, it's going to become your own thing,
right?
Which the opening 4 pages of Ted the Shield Tester are the exact concept, right? A kid that tests shields.
Yeah.
The reason he tests it, what he tested it against, why he's testing it, and how it ends, completely the other author's story. So, really no.
I don't think either of us thought he was actually going to do it.
Yeah.
When I thought about this idea about the residential schools thing, I was like, someone has to have done this. Somebody has to have told the story similar to this, and I can't find anything.
Yeah.
Just kind of surface googling. But I mean, I have a lot of reading to do. I know I want to read all the Moonshot stories. I want to read this place and all these different graphic novels set with Indigenous characters. I have to read all that stuff as well to get to get a sense of what's out there as far as storytelling is concerned. So this is like not a short term. This is going to be something. If I continue working on it, will be years in the making. I think.
Yeah. So my advice to you, as a break the story simply into the following 3 easy parts. Somebody somewhere wants something. Complications ensue. Right?
Okay.
If you have the answer for the somebody, the somewhere, and the what they want and what the complications are, you can do that in point form.
Yeah.
It allows you now, because you have the name of your character and where it's taking place and all these kind of things, to transplant that character into all the different versions of the setting you can imagine when you're walking to your car, when you're on a long drive somewhere, when you're waiting in line. It allows you to run through that very simple way of thinking of your story and explode it in many different avenues. And you will find that one of them won't go away.
Okay.
It'll stick.
Some say Pauly Shore isn't the greatest actor in the world, but there may also be some who say he is. This reviewer takes no position on the subject.
We have a friend that we do conventions with who has a very specific style of artwork, and it looks like kind of wood block printing. There's one guy that does it, and another guy came along and saw what he was doing and saw how successful he was, and basically copied, like point for point, his business plan of taking video game characters and putting them in the style, and even his name is very similar, and just basically completely copied his business plan.
So it would be as if I started a rival studio called Pacing Artwork.
No.
Right? Like, it even rhymes.
It'd be running after the art.
Yeah. It would be Art Pursuit. Okay, I start Art Pursuit. Right? And I use Shattered Vector style.
Yep.
Slightly different characters, but basically the same kind of stuff.
Okay, so now what should I do in that situation? What would you do if somebody came along and very obviously saw that what you were doing was working and tried to do the exact same thing?
Well, I have to present to you the historical context of Pepsi and Coke. What you do is you just
let them be.
Let them be. You can't, right? I mean, they fought each other to try and close each other down, and what they figured out was that it made both products, better at giving us all type 2 diabetes, but it made both products better by having the competition and letting the market.
And there were actually a lot of other colas as well. There's
so many colas. Those were just the ones that won the cola wars,
exactly,
as they say, right? So it's crappy, but the market will
bear it.
If the market will bear it, then you have to allow it. If you believe in the idea of capitalism as being an idea that that you have an idea that has value, that when you make the widget, someone else can buy that widget and they can get it from the source.
Okay, sure.
Right.
But what would you do personally?
What would I do personally?
What would you do personally?
What would my small self do? Not my big self?
Yes, what would your
small
self do?
My small self? If somebody was doing a lot of propaganda, a lot of propaganda style things, I'd have to ask myself where my inspiration came from. So there might be true that if someone was doing a lot of my World War Weird stuff, like weird monsters.
Would you pivot away from it or lean harder into it?
If it's the only thing I did, I'd lean harder.
Yeah.
You'd have to distill it down to its core. But I'm not concerned by people I'm going to do a Psychic Institute book. Well, that's fine. That's only one book that I'm doing, right? I'm going to do a fairy tale characters book. Well, that's only one thing that I'm doing, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a one-trick pony, then as you get older, the younger pony will always seem like a threat. If you have a whole stable, right, of different equestrian characters, then there's no real worry for you.
And I would say to this example of your friend who's had their work copied, is this person are they setting up across from them? Are they
sometimes
do
really?
The same circuit?
Man,
so they're very often
there's something like drawing inspiration from somebody is one thing, but deliberately copying and then actively trying to take business away, is that what you would say is the strategy there?
I would say would be the
okay.
situation.
Now let me hold on. I'm just going to be. I don't agree with this point of view, but I will present it because I believe that the point of view is a valid point of view, even if I myself don't agree with it. Of the thousands of people that comes to shows, let's say 10,000 people attend a show, not all 10,000 visit that booth.
No.
Maybe 500 of them visit that one booth, meaning that there's 9,500 other customers that can go to the other booth. Right? You haven't actually taken the money away. And if you did, it's because the people liked it better. You can't blame the consumer
or because
for preferring a product over yours.
The artist did a better sales job,
right?
So that there's more motivation to be a better salesperson.
Yeah, what you have there is you have evolution of an idea, right? This is your idea is now competing. You're the Velociraptor, right, with no feathers, and you're the Velociraptor with feathers, and one of you is really good at cooling off in the hot sun, so you can chase your prey longer, right? You're not angry at the other Velociraptor. You're too busy trying to eat, right?
And there were actually, I'm thinking of examples in Hollywood about this as well. Remember the volcano movies? There's 2 volcano movies.
There's always 2 volcano movies.
Volcano and Dante's Peak came out within months of each other. Yeah. Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Yeah.
Right? These movies, just kind of these...
Bugs Life and Ants.
Yes, although that was deliberate. I just learned about that. Oh. The Ants thing was the former Disney CEO trying to scoop current Disney Pixar. That was actually a bit personal in there.
So, but it's always personal, and I think that's what Justin's gotten at, is that if you leave your high-minded, calculating self, your bigger self, out of it, and get down to the small self, you'll be like, that was my idea.
Right.
Damn it. How dare you? right? Where do you get off, sir?
Well,
right?
I'm sure that was the reaction of this person, right? Like, what?
Yeah, and it's a fair reaction. So this is not me saying, oh, you should just let it go. This is me saying, feel your feelings, but recognize you can't stop it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Like your feelings are valid, but so too is the marketplace valid. And if both groups are doing a style of printing based on properties they ultimately don't own, what the hell kind of high moral ground do you think you've got? You're both doing
Mario.
You're both doing splatter Marios, right? Well, Mario's not yours anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Okay. All right.
Right?
Fair enough.
It's the Liechtenstein argument, right? Which is, the Liechtenstein paintings were gigantic representations of Kirby and a number of other artists, but Liechtenstein presents it in a gallery, taking a tiny panel of somebody else's comic book, presenting it as a giant. Yeah, right. Yeah, my son is shouting out here also that Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario are made of the same stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
One gives you coins and one gives you rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
One you have basically that little star that lets you run really fast. That's how you start. In Sonic,
yeah,
right? You just start fast. So it's the singer, not the song.
Okay. Well, I feel encouraged. I'm going to continue to explore this and see what comes of it. I don't know. I've never actually felt the urge to write a story before, which is kind of interesting.
So I cannot wait to send this. Negan's listening. He always listens. But
yeah.
I'm going to send it to him as soon as it's together because he will be... it's one of the first times I think one of the guests of the podcast had us or informed us unintentionally on content.
Yes.
For the show.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Kept us thinking for a whole other episode.
Yeah, the rest of our guests have been pretty much duds.
You know what, though?
That is not what I meant.
I'm going to put this out there just as we're wrapping up here. I miss Sam. Can we get Sam back on here at some point?
Yeah. Sam, come back to us. She is got a pretty sweet gig.
I know she does, but it's like, come on. Come down for the podcast.
No, but hold on.
1 hour.
She joined the fight.
Yes, that's true.
All her extra time she's spending making comics right now. And if you are missing Sam, please go find Krampus is My Boyfriend, which is now available on Webtoon and a number of other webcomic services. Also at smbico.com, you can get links to all of it there. Sam is living the dream right now, which is why she is not here.
But this is why she should be here telling us about how.
Well, we're going to get her on as a official guest of a new webcomic.
All right.
This has been Super Pulp Science, where we talked about how genre gets made, why you should make it, and we are encouraging you to join the fight and make comics.
Make your own comics, though.